Okay, well, it's time. I want to welcome you all to this webinar on mentoring with Dr. Chuck Coker. A little bit of quick background. My name is Bill Mounts. I'm the president and founder of Biblical Training. When I started Biblical Training in 2000, the goal had been to create a leadership training track. My concern was primarily about the state of unprepared lay leaders, otherwise known as elders, in the church. And the problem was that while I was able to get a lot of academic content, really couldn't find people that would help me with what is leadership? How do you find leaders? How do you train them? How do you nurture them? And then Dr. Chuck Coker came on the scene. Chuck has been a mentor to in the secular workspace, a coach to executives all over the place. And he contacted us and he said, I'd like to redo all of my classes, but I'd like to do them within the Christian context. And as we got to know Chuck, we were ecstatic about that possibility. And I was ecstatic because now we're finally getting classes on leadership that would train future elders in the church and frankly, train anyone who wants any level of leadership. This particular webinar is going to be on the topic of mentoring. We've recorded 6 of his classes. I think 2 of them are currently published. We still have to film the class on mentoring, and I think of mentoring sometimes just as a form of discipleship. Same principles apply, but it's not. You can do it whether it's one-on-one mentoring or whether it's 1-on-12 with your elders or whatever be the case. So. I'm really, really happy. We, like I said, we haven't recorded the class yet. These classes generally cost about $10,000, maybe up to 15. We haven't raised the funds for it yet. And so if you'd like to donate towards it, that'd be great. There's a link in the chat where you could do that. But either way, we really appreciate you being here. And what we're going to do is Chuck is going to cover just kind of like the highlights of what's going to be in the class when it comes out, just the basic issues of mentoring. Many of you have already sent in questions to him, and he has woven those questions into his presentation. And so he's going to make about a 40-minute presentation, and you are welcome to submit other questions through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll keep about 20 minutes at the end for him to answer those questions. But anyway, enough about that. And Dr. Coker, I should say also was a seminary professor for a while. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Dr. Coker.
Thank you, Bill, so much. And I'm excited to be here with you today because mentoring is one of the things that we often miss with our church staffs and in nonprofit organizations, and obviously in our corporations across America. So it's very dear to me because I've done some recent studies that illustrate that in nonprofits alone, there is a 70% turnover in a 5-year period. And a lot of that is because there isn't that engagement, there isn't that mentorship, and it's almost 50% in faith-based institutions. So what we have found, and the exciting part about today, is I want to give you a quick overview of some of the aspects that can really enhance your church staff, your elders, your deacons, and the other people within your fellowship. So what I'm going to start with is, first of all, what is mentoring? Well, it's really a partnership between a mentee and a mentor. And it's an opportunity for the mentor to share his or her talents and skills and experience and expertise. It requires a real investment of your faith, time, energy, and thought. But here's the difference between mentoring and coaching. Coaching is a project-based aspect or approach. It takes a short period of time, where mentoring is a longer term relationship that focuses on learning experiences that foster the growth and the development of the people that you're mentoring. And it's done normally through feedback sessions. It's literally much more focused than a coaching session is. Now, before we get going, I'd like to differentiate between mentoring and discipleship, because many times, many people refer to them equally, where discipleship is that act of obedience from Matthew 28:19 to where we move towards Christ-likeness. But mentoring focuses on building a specific capacity and practical application in a very particular environment. So it is very focused rather than building the whole person. However, it does encompass all aspects of life and how you operate, not just in the world and business, but in your family and church, which we know are our first mission fields. But the important thing to remember, if you are considering becoming a mentor, is that you protect that mentee and you move them towards maturity within the focus. So what we're going to do when we talk about mentoring today is we're going to keep it in the context of a Christian atmosphere. But what it really boils down to is helping people to become more like Jesus within a specific direction or calling. It's that self-improvement or a personal development based on your experience as a Christian. So what you have to consider if you are thinking about becoming a mentor is, what are the best characteristics or qualities that you can bring to the table? And do you really get joy in that kind of service? Because it takes a willing heart and a desire to pass on to someone what God has done in your life. Now, here's the important thing for you to remember. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a biblical scholar. You just need to have a desire to help and invest in other people, regardless of your personality, because there is no perfect personality for a mentor. Next, just ask the Holy Spirit to lead you into this process. Ask yourself questions like, who do I actually want to invest in? What kind of need do they need to grow spiritually, mentally, physically? And what kind of goals are they going to ask me to be a part of? Next, you'll want to learn a little bit about their personality, knowledge, and experience, and I'm going to cover that in a very short period of time. But most of all, as you go through this process, it's important for you to add in the things that Scripture has told you about what you're mentoring on, regardless of what that is. Next, think about the mentee. The mentee is going to have a vision for their end results. They can't just say, well, will you mentor me? Well, they need to know what is the objective, and they need to be able to communicate that to you. Otherwise, this is going to be an effort and frustration. Secondly, ask them, what do you really want to be known for? And what are the principles that you as an individual stand for? And lastly, what will reaching that goal make a difference for in your life and the life of the people that you are mentoring? So your mentee needs to understand that they can relate to you. It's critically important because building trust is going to be the foundation of this relationship. Because if they can't trust you, they're not going to stick with the process, and you're both going to end up frustrated. So let's talk about some key elements. First of all, you need to be able to be transparent with them. You need to be able to talk freely, and they have to be able to relate to you. So that's going to mean that you're going to have to share some of the mistakes that you've made and how those mistakes impacted you so that they don't make those same mistakes. Next, the same person needs to show up for each of the mentoring sessions, because if they don't know who they're meeting with, they don't know how to prepare and they don't know what to expect from you. And then when you move into the application session that we'll talk about in just a minute or two, the things that you give them need to be feasible. And then you have to sit back and empower them in a way that they know that if they make a mistake, they're not going to get yelled at or get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated with them. They need to know that the communication is going to flow two ways, and that you're going to add in a little bit of spiritual flavor as you walk them through the direction that they're heading. One good way that you may want to start is by sharing your resume with them, telling them a little bit about your background so they can discern where they can pull from and how they can use your experience to provide the shortcuts that they're going to need. Because the whole concept here that we're working on is growth. You see, we need to remove any tension in the very early stages of the relationship, because the mentee needs to learn and grow. And mentors need to understand how that mentee is going to respond to their feedback. You see, there's two factors that you want to work with. First of all, once you've made contact with the mentor or the mentee, you must create an environment of trust that we just pointed out. And then you need to identify from the mentee, where is their humility level? Where is their motivation? And where is their response to feedback? Several years ago, I did a study with DePaul University on what it takes to be coachable and be able to grow and develop from that coaching process. 69.09% correlation of success was based on humility. If there isn't humility, the chance of your mentee growing and developing is going to be challenged. So as you think about that, these are things that you will be able to pick up along the way. I also have some tools that I'm going to share with you at the end of the program where you can actually measure these factors. Next, stage 2 is critically important. And I say that with a fair amount of emphasis because Paul says it too in the pastoral epistles. He actually uses the word sophronizo, which means to encourage and develop to a well-balanced mind and individual. And that's really what you're trying to accomplish with your mentees, because there's 3 areas that are critical that you need to discern during the mentoring process. First of all, we know from Psalm 139 and Jeremiah 1:5 that God knitted us together in the womb. He actually created a personality for each one of us uniquely. Secondly, Esther 4:4 tells us that we are placed where we are for such a time as this. And that means we were placed in a certain family, a certain culture, a certain educational system, and with a very specific sphere of influence. Now, sometimes those behaviors in those cultures clash a little bit, but other times they work together. And that's the unique part about the third area that you want to be able to understand in working with your mentee, and that is their gifting. because spiritual gifts, in my personal estimation, come in 4 clusters. Those 4 clusters are displaying God's love, managing with God's principles, which are behaviorally based. In other words, they're built into your personality. But then comes the supernatural. The supernatural is displaying God's authority and communicating God's mind, because those are only things that God can give you. You can actually measure their level of spiritual maturity with the Fruit of the Spirit assessment, which I will make available to you also at no cost. So let's think about what we're really trying to identify in our mentee at this point. First of all, is there some assertiveness? Is there that humility and that motivation within their personality to learn what you're going to share with them? Second, do they actually seek your feedback and then respond to it positively? And lastly, what's their motive for wanting this information, and will they actually apply it in the process? So at this point, you move into stage 3 with the individual. And after the introduction, where the mentee and the mentor share their background, their experiences, and what's relevant to what they're trying to look for, they're going to begin to review their goals and objectives. And it's important that the mentee think about this before sitting down in this session, because if these are not identified clearly for the mentor, they'll get off on a rabbit trail, and then this can lead to frustration. But once those are placed there, what can happen is the discussion with the mentee can begin to refine and establish those goals and begin to lay out the first steps. And I'm going to give you a very specific approach to that that's going to streamline this and make it easy for you. Then establish the timelines. What do you really want to work with time-wise? When do you plan to meet? What is the focus? What are the meeting times actually going to be, so that there are times that you can exchange emails and interactions with during the process that will allow them to make sure that they are prepared for the meeting. And here's the thing that's important. The mentee and the mentor need to express appreciation for each other, and each session review and confirm the commitments. Another study that I had a chance to work on was the fact that in the communication process, when you interact with the person, 62% of the time, there is not enough clarity from the person who's communicating to the person receiving to bring full completion to a job. So you have to remember, if you're an extrovert, you're going to go fast and people aren't going to catch up. If you're an introvert, you're going to want more details. So these are things that are important for you to remember as you go through this process, because this is a deep process of cooperation and collaboration. The two of you have to actually link your goals and strategically plan the dates for the program inception and when you're going to reach those individual goals. You share ideas. You think about things out loud, and you determine how you're going to work through this process and what it's actually going to look like. Because with different personalities, there's going to be different expectations. So identify, once you've met, how are you going to communicate? When are you going to meet? And also, from a mentor's perspective, you'll want to make sure that you help support and help that mentee during the process by working with them. And one of the things that you'll want to do is personally assist them in the development of their SMART plan that we're going to talk about in just a second. Now, at this point, what I want to do is I want to share my screen with you and show you the importance of this relationship. You see, the mentor's responsibility is to help establish those goals, those priorities, and make sure that the commitment and the follow-through is positively given and positively accepted so that the mentee understands each stage of the process and is open to that. The mentee, on the other hand, if they don't clarify their goals and have set meeting times, the mentor is going to end up in frustration. They also have to be disciplined. That discipline is going to be very critical as they work through this process, because growing and developing is going to be through particular types of projects that not only will they do with their mentor, but they may need to seek them elsewhere from other managers that they work with, other people in their church, or wherever it might be. But most importantly, both people actually need to be prepared, realize that there is confidentiality in the process, that these schedules are necessary to be kept online, that there's challenging goals, and that the problems and the concerns are given respectively. So as we step back to this process, it's important that each person understand those roles, because as we approach these projects, after the priorities are established, these are going to be learning activities for the mentee. You see, there has to be three types of learning activities. First of all, developmental projects are critical. This is where you build those leadership skills through reading, research, volunteering, projects or professional development workshops or conferences. But then they also need to get out of their comfort zone at times and slip into networking opportunities. The mentee has to realize that the mentor can't solve all of their issues for them. They need to get a lot of different people's input. And the second thing that we found in building trust that was most important was being able to take direction from someone that you may not necessarily like or respect, because the Lord can give good information through the most unusual people at times, as I'm sure you all know. Thirdly, we want to make sure that the projects that we're building with our mentees are challenging. Make them stretch assignments. Make them outside of your group, your department, or the leadership role, to see how well they build that flexibility. So let's review a little bit. Let's start off. Our first goal is, what's the end result? It's Stephen Covey's concept, begin with the end in mind. We're going to set specific times, and we're going to identify what is the level of quality that we're going to do. And remember, a single goal, we're simply coaching them, but mentoring takes a little bit of more time, and it can stretch 6 months, maybe even a year. So the important thing to remember is that major goals that the individual is broken down into measurable chunks, or a series of objectives that can go some way towards making it more realistic and achievable in the given time frames that we're working. So what kind of plan is going to help us do that? we're going to talk about what's been around for a little while, but it works. And that's why it's been consistent over the years. And it's called a SMART plan. SMART. Specific. What exactly do you want to accomplish? And it can't be, I want to be a good mom or a good dad. What does that mean? I want to be a good mom or dad by reading to my kids every night is more specific. Measurable. How are you actually going to do it? What are the steps that you're going to take in the process? Is it attainable? Can you put it on the calendar and actually measure where you're going and how does it fit into your schedule? As the father of 9 children, I realized very quickly that if I didn't put it on the calendar, I wasn't going to be able to spend time with my children. So I dated all my girls and boys as they grew up, and guess what? They still talk to me. That's what you have to do. You have to have it on your calendar or it won't get done. Now, the second most important part of this is it actually relevant? Because if there's not a motivation on your mentee's part, guess what? They're not going to do it. Lastly, what's the time frame that we're working in? I suggest that when you work with your mentee the first time, set a specific time frame that does not exceed 90 days. And the reason why I say that is because if you don't set it so that they can achieve a specific goal fairly quickly, then it becomes a discouragement. Now, I'm going to walk you through what that SMART plan looks like right now, and then you can see exactly what it looks like. You fill in the information that you know about the individual. You summarize their strengths and summarize their weaknesses. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, these can be limiting factors that actually keep your mentee from reaching their goals. This confident power personnel that's task-oriented and a multitasker is probably not going to display a lot of warmth and may not relate to people. They may even be impersonal and have poor listening skills. So what is their goal? To have a positive interaction with employees three times a week. And that actionable, measurable aspect is when they get a smile out of the employee, they know that that's reaching their objective for that particular individual. We connect at lunches or one-on-ones because that engagement that we talked about at the beginning of this program is what reduces the turnover and keeps people on staff or within an elder program for a period of time. In this particular case, we want to do that within a 3-week period of time. So what we'll do at this point is that we will focus on moving back to our particular program here. Now, let's move into stage 5. Stage 5 tells us that we as mentors need to learn to ask questions. There's a great new book out called Leading with Questions that if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do that, because questions are much better responses oftentimes to clear up that 62% that's not discernible. So let me give you an example. The Pharisees came to Jesus and said, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Most of you would say the answer was, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Well, wrong. Jesus said, whose picture is on the coin? What did he do? He was teaching us a lesson. He was teaching us that oftentimes we need greater clarity so that the mentee and the people that we're talking to need greater clarity. Second of all, it gives our slow brains a little bit of extra time to think and reason through. Jesus answered many questions with questions, and so it is less likely to set off emotional triggers when you give those bite-sized feedbacks in the form of questions, because it brings clarity. Second, it helps with the accountability process. And here's the one thing that I want you to remember. The mentor and the mentee need to develop a level of intimacy, because there will never be accountability if there is not intimacy. So let's talk about now, okay, how do we actually make this process work? Let's try to bring it together here. First of all, we need to help our mentee envision worthy goals and inspire them to move towards goals after they make the commitment to those goals. Second, as a mentor, you need to listen respectively to your mentee, and you need to be empathetic. You need to be the sounding board that they're comfortable asking questions and making commitments to. Help ensure that your mentee is identifying and focusing on the motivation for that goal so that they will have the success and reinforce the need for that growth and development. Fourthly, use constructive criticism in a non-judgmental manner based on their behaviors, and you don't need to confront negative attitudes. You can answer things very simply like, I think that's probably a good idea, but have you ever thought about doing it this way? Or, what if we did it this way? What do you think would happen? You see, you've moved them from an area of being confrontational to an area of collaboration. And that's what you want with your mentee. You want that collaboration and that collaborative spirit to exist because the two minds are better than one. Those non-judgmental responses are critical because they are actually going to encourage your mentee's autonomy. They are going to feel engaged, they're going to feel empowered, and they're going to gain confidence through these learning opportunities, even if they make a mistake. Because isn't sanctification all about learning from our mistakes? I think that's the way God designed it, and why Jesus died for us, was so that we could afford to make those mistakes and grow from them. We do learn better from those mistakes than doing it right oftentimes, don't we? Now, lastly, encourage your mentee to explore multiple options, to do things different ways, because they may go to the first, most obvious, tried and true approach, but help them color outside the lines, help them think creatively, because there are going to be times during this process that they are going to have to be outside the box and they're going to have to be creative. So you can identify their level of creativity as you walk through this process. Now, I've given you a lot of directions. Now I'm going to give you a few. Please don't do this. Don't be critical and judgmental. Don't tell them what to do. Give them some advice. If I were you, I would think about it this way. Help your mentees solve the problems. Talk through the process with them. And don't use particularly closed questions. Let them think out loud. Let them make assumptions and take advantage of opportunities to work with them rather than interfering with their process. You may also want to coordinate with the mentee and the people they work for or with so that they can have some interaction time. Don't make a promise that you don't keep to your mentee, and don't give them false information. Last but not least, I'll close with this. You are not responsible for your mentee's success or failure. If you invest in them and you allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you because you love them and you care about them because they are God's creature, and we remember what Romans 8:1 says, there is therefore no condemnation. And if they're a believer, if God's not condemning them, we can't. So we are not responsible for their success or failure. Our job is to plant and water. It's not about bringing the results. So don't beat yourself up if your mentee struggles a little bit. Now, I want to end this particular session and open up for questions at this particular time. And we're going to be sending out my contact information if you have questions. I'm going to give you some free assessments about understanding your mentee's behaviors and mindsets, their spiritual gifts, and their level of spiritual maturity, all free. You don't have to pay for any of these. And if you don't use them, shame on you, because they're being used right now in 128 different countries at churches everywhere. Make use of these tools. The same way that Bill Mounce founded this organization was to pour into you for the kingdom. So I want to pour into you by giving you tools to help your mentee. And lastly, you'll be sent some information on my new book, Are You Coachable? Which will be printed in the near future. And I'm actually going to give you the first chapter of the book if you just want to get those updates. So at this time, I'm going to open the floor to questions, and more than happy to take any questions you have in the next 20 minutes.
Good. Well, this is Bill. For some reason, I can't get my video started. Sorry, but let me start with the clarifying question. Requart. Chuck?
What? No, this is a book that I've written. Are You Coachable?
No,
and,
I'm sorry. The Leading with Questions book that you referenced.
Yes, you can find it on Amazon, right? Mm-hmm.
Not familiar.
Yes, let me make sure.
There's two on Amazon. I also make sure we get the right one. There's two editions.
Okay.
The same one, Leading with Questions, How Leaders Find the Right Solutions by Knowing What to Ask. And then the update is Leading with Questions, How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing How and What to Ask.
That's the second one, correct.
So it's the updated one that you're recommending. Okay, good.
Yes.
So Michael, Marquardt, and I'm looking at the Amazon page, and so it's there. Okay, we had all kinds of really good questions. Guy, whose last name I can't pronounce, I'm sorry, Guy. It says, what's your take on the issue of spiritual fatherhood? Is a mentor best described as a spiritual father?
A spiritual father, according to 1 John 2:12 through 14, is a person who understands cause and effect. And they have moved from doing the big, powerful things that we see in the young adult, defeating Satan, etc. But the pater, as it's given in Greek, refers to a person who is now beginning to invest. And this doesn't mean a physical genetic father. This is a person who is laying the foundations for the person. And becoming a spiritual father can be a mentoring process and or a discipling process. But it is a long-term commitment. It is not something that we do for a short period of time.
Yeah. Well, my fatherhood commitment has lasted for a long time, so that's a good analogy, I guess. Trey wants to know, how does personality influence the process of discipleship?
Oh, that's critical.
Yeah.
You have to remember that the extroverted person moves at a very fast pace, and they are often going to miss details, and they're going to have to come back and clean up their messes. Where an introverted person is much more concrete or detail oriented. They're going to be slower. They're going to take a little bit more time to get things done, but they don't want to move on until they have a complete understanding. And then you have the thinker who's analyzing and breaking everything down into details, and they can tend to take a lot of time, and they have a lot of why do you want to do it that way and why should we? But the feeler is much more emotionally based, and so when they get into a situation where the anxiety level is up, they're going to act more quickly and possibly make the wrong decision. Personality is critical, and if you'll go to the link for our free assessments, you can get that done. It won't take 30 minutes, but you can have that done and know without a doubt who you're working with if you're going to mentor them.
Yeah, and so that applies both to the mentor and the mentee, doesn't it? I mean,
exactly.
Personalities, yeah. You talk about these free assessments. Where are those links?
Those links are on my website, lifethrive.com, lifethrive.com, and there's a link at the top that says assessments, and when you hit that, there'll be a drop-down menu that says free assessments, and you'll see the behaviors and values, the spiritual gifts, and the fruit of the spirit assessments there for no cost.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you're in talking about your personality, I'm reminded of the one of the two classes that we already have up on biblical training, the one that's called personality and mindsets. And that's really what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
And just for you all to know, this was of this, well, I especially like the class on conflict because I'm no good at it, but I really enjoyed this one because I realized when I was pastoring, I didn't really know myself, and I definitely did not know my staff, and that lack of knowledge of both our personalities, which is what we're born with, and our mindset, what is developed, was crucial for communication and success in ministry. So that'd be another place that you all could go to follow up on this. So thanks. We have several questions that have come in. Marcelo Ramos asks, there's several that have asked the same thing, but does the mentor choose the mentee or the other way around?
Say that again, please, Bill.
Who chooses whom? Does a mentor choose the mentee, or does the mentee choose the mentor?
Well, it can actually go both ways, Bill. A person who has a desire for a mentor should begin to try to identify who has the natural expertise or the experience in the area that they want to grow and develop. If it's Bible, find a pastor on the staff that may not be the senior pastor that you're going to get to first off. On the other hand, if you are in a place or a position to where your role gives you freedom and you're well seated in the church and you don't have a lot of demands and you want to reach that church father stage and be able to help someone understand cause and effect, then you can actually begin to try to identify, go to one of the pastors or the staff members and identify who do you see as up and coming in their faith? Who's excited about their faith and who has the potential for growth and leadership? So I've seen it work both ways, Bill.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that was related is, let's say you're willing to be a mentor. How do you let people know? I'm assuming you go to the staff, you let them know in the church, or anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in any church, it's going to look a little bit differently. We actually have a bulletin board that has a section for jobs, has a section for service, and has a section for coaching and mentoring. And so we can post it there in our particular church. If the elders are notified, I am pretty sure that the elders or the deacons in a church are going to know someone who wants that kind of growth and development. And if it's a smaller church, go talk to the pastor. Tell him that you want to invest in someone. Who does he see that has that potential?
Okay, good. Hey, another question from Marcelo in Brazil. How long should a mentor walk with his mentee?
Well, I think the minimum is 6 months. Okay. And depending on what they're actually trying to accomplish, it can be several years. There should be intermediate goals. As I showed you on your SMART plan, you want to get them through that first goal and quickly so that they can feel and build their confidence. Mm-hmm. After that, it can be a longer term goal, such as I want to start seminary. Yeah. Maybe not to be a preacher, but to be a better believer.
All right. And by the way, in reference to this class you did on SMART, it is all recorded. We're just waiting for funding to be able to get it up. But the class is coming, and hopefully within the next 6 months we'll have it up. So just let y'all know that. Another question from again, I'm sorry, these are fascinating names. Abede, Abede, Alexander. He says, how do you encourage mentoring in a postmodern culture that rejects the idea of learning from elders or other people's experience or an expert in something? I mean, our culture is not bent this way right now, but
that's true.
Anything to say towards encouraging
the
fight culture?
Here's the thing that I would suggest in that particular case, where there is a natural resistance to someone older, then what I would say is I have an opportunity to share some expertise in this particular area. Some of the areas may not be modern, but I would like to learn from my mentee how some of those things have transitioned from where they were when I developed that experience. So I'd really like to have a co-mentoring relationship where I give the experience and they update me on what's more modern.
And what you're doing at that point is you're earning trust as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, good. What is the difference or similarity between mentoring and biblical counseling?
Between mentoring and what?
Biblical counseling.
My goodness. A biblical counselor is an individual who understands the way the psyche works, both from a mental perspective and a spiritual perspective, because the pure mental perspectives have certain constructs that they work around, like dissociative behavior and things like that, where the biblical perspective takes into consideration the spiritual realm. Right. And no matter whether we want to admit it or not, the spiritual realm is there. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want, with a biblical counselor, to have an understanding of how to counsel from a technical perspective, but how to blend that with the Holy Spirit speaking through them.
To put it in another more simpler way, I guess, is just about anybody can mentor, can't they? They can.
Absolutely.
Not everybody can be a biblical counselor.
That's correct.
All right. All right. That was from Leonardo Galanza. Hey, I got your name at least somewhat right. Thanks. Um, let me see. I just got a few. We have about 10 more minutes. I got a few more questions I want to convey.
Okay.
Um, how many individual? This is from Mark Miller. How many individuals can you effectively mentor at a time?
Well, that's an interesting question because the American Management Association says the best you can manage at any one particular time is 8 people. Now,
Oh,
Jesus did 12, but he was supernatural,
yeah.
so I would really rely on that number because if there's more than that, it's easy to get lost. And my suggestion would be to keep it to no more than 5 or 6.
All right.
You
Mark had
can't you can't really have that level of intimacy and accountability with more than that.
right. Mark also asked, what happens when the mentee doesn't progress as you agreed upon in the time frame you agreed upon? If the mentee doesn't progress or loses interest, how do you cease the mentorship relationship in a loving way?
Well, I think the important thing to say to them is this. When we started out, these were our objectives. And so far, I've tried to be faithful with my part. What did I do to discourage you? What did I do that may have influenced you not achieving those objectives in a timely manner? And you have to do this from your heart because this person may have interpreted something that you've said improperly. And this is a time when you can rebuild their trust by becoming relatable. I'm sorry, I missed that. I miss things like that. My wife tells me that from time to time. But what I would like to do is let's go back. Let's start again and take a look at that. How can I be of more help to you in this situation? When you take it on yourself, the mentee can't argue with that. But if they, in most cases, are bound to the Spirit, they're going to admit it's not your fault.
Oh, all right. Here's a fascinating question from Jerry Aubrey, and it has to do about not so much a mentor, but a mentorship program in a church. And Jerry asks, how do you start a mentorship? I'm going to put in program. I have noticed that many churches in my local area don't offer any, and I think they are vital for spiritual understanding and growth. And many churches aren't interested in starting any. So how would you go about, as a person who feels called to this, to get a mentoring program in church going, finding people who will be mentors, that kind of stuff?
That's a good question because churches need them. And what we find in most churches today are discipleship groups or Bible study groups that end up being fellowship groups rather than digging deep into the scriptures. So approaching the pastor or the executive pastor or whoever's in charge of this particular area is, Pastor, I just watched a webinar on mentoring, and it really made me think about the fact that I know there are people in our church that want help. I know there are people that would take the help if it was offered to them. How can you and I work together to make that happen?
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I am really sorry. We're just about at time. And we did this with our previous webinar, so I'm assuming we're doing it again, and that we're going to go through all the questions that you all submitted in the Q&A, and the ones that we weren't able to answer, we'll get them posted with Dr. Coker's answers. So that's coming. So all of you will be getting a follow-up email with a lot more of this kind of information, but there'll be links to, okay, how do I post a question and things like that. Obviously, this is just an overview of what the course is going to be. Chuck, how many lessons are in this course altogether?
Well, there's 7 particular sections, and there will probably be anywhere from 8 to 10 lessons, 3 to 8 minute lessons in each section.
Okay. So there'll be a lot more on this on the class. And so again, we have not been able to do the fundraising for this class yet. And if you would like to help us with that, that would be fantastic. And there'll be a link in the chat where you can donate to this. I also wanted to point out that the other class that we already have up on biblical training from Dr. Coker is the class on conflict. And I had a good friend who was a pastor when I was a teacher at Gordon Conwell Seminary in Boston. And in his church was the world's most renowned teacher of pastors. How do you, it's Haddon Robinson. How do you prepare sermons? And so I asked him once, I said, so what do you spend your time on? And I expected, because Haddon was in there, that he would say, well, 70% on sermon prep. And he said, about 7% on conflict management, 70% on conflict management. I went, my goodness, you stand up before Haddon Robinson with a few days prep on a sermon. Of course, Haddon wouldn't judge anyone. But the course on conflict is really good and really helpful. And I encourage you to go look at it. We got the address for the assessment, and I'm just checking my notes to make sure I covered everything. Someone had asked a question about what was that book again? It's called Leading with Questions. And there's basically a first and a second edition, and you want to get the second edition. So thank you, Dr. Coker. Thank you for allowing us to spend this hour with you. Thank you for your incredible generosity of sharing your life's work with biblical training. And we do look forward to many other times where we can collaborate and get your message out. I've just been noticing that they've been putting up links in the chat for those classes, so that's good. So thank you again very much. Thank you for all of you who have joined. The numbers have been consistently above 200, so that's really cool. And blessings, especially on you who live in somewhat more isolated places where you might not have access to this kind of stuff. I hope that this has been helpful, and we will be doing more of these as we go. So thank you very much.